Usha Gangadhar in Argentina, and of course the principal Professor Pushpalata K, and of course my friend Shabazz, who is there with me for so many years and who is in touch with me for so many years on different things. So also Mr. Pasha, who has shared valuable inputs at the beginning of this program. So coming back to the topic, this is the 28th webinar which I am addressing in the last 20 days, okay, on the topics concerning about COVID-19 and the Indian economy. And every time I speak, there are new things which has come up. So yesterday I had one more session. I was addressing one national seminar on the topic, the challenges and the way forward during this COVID-19 period. So yesterday what I delivered and today what I will be delivering will be entirely different, because the globe is changing like that. So every day we are coming up with new things. Every day there are new strategic movements which is happening in the global arena. And every day it's a new learning or a new way of sailing with the pandemic, what we are facing. So it's not right for us to call post-COVID Indian economy, because post-COVID situation still we are not exactly predicting when the post-COVID situation will come. Today we are in the peak COVID-19 situation where the virus has already infected more than 5 lakh people, and almost around 49 to 50% of the people have recovered from this virus. So when I say recovery is not 100%, okay, because the post effect of this virus is something large. It can have a lot of damage on other circulatory system in the body, and the impact of that virus may continue still for so many years, even after they say that he has recovered from that virus. So it's better we stay safe and we practice the procedures of whatever the government is saying and whatever the health administrations have informed us. Better to save ourselves by not getting infected by this virus, because once virus gets infected, right, then lot of other simultaneously or consequently lot of other challenges will be there on human body. So hope we all practice the measures whatever has been recommended by the government and the health department. Having said so, coming back to the topic, a very important topic which is going around in the globe today, and a very close topic to my heart also, because once we see the happening of the scenario of unfolding of what the things will be in the next couple of years, I think there is a huge opportunity for a country like India, which will be gaining more because of this COVID-19 related issue. Having said so, let me first start introducing the topic to you. The topic is, what is this new world order we are talking about? That means what happened to the existing world order, or what happened to the world order which was already there, which was already practiced in the global arena as one of the very strongest strategic points. So today, where we are heading towards, or where the globe looks like after this year, that is very important. So having said so, the new world order, before we know about what is the new world order, let us talk about something about the old world order, what it was. So I don't have any presentation to do it, because I don't normally prefer making a PPT and presenting anything. Okay, because that is not the correct way of projecting the concepts and ideas, especially through the concept of webinars. Webinars, it's not better. You don't use PPTs or other any modes to speak and express yourself about what is there in your thoughts. So I don't have any PowerPoint. I don't make any PowerPoints for these type of programs. So I'll be just sharing my thoughts about this world order, and at the end of the session you can raise questions relating to this particular topic or any topic relating to COVID-19. Having said so, the first thing what I need to make sure is, let us understand what is this world order was. See, the world order was, it constituted three major countries or three major groups, you can call it as. One side it was US and Canada, the other side it was European Union countries, and the third side it was Japan and China. See, these were the countries which were playing a very important role in the global arena, especially in terms of contribution towards GDP, where it is found that 75% of the GDP used to come from these countries. That is the global GDP I'm talking about. So when we talk about global GDP, 75% of global GDP used to come from US and Canada on one region, European Union on the other region, and in Asian region it was China and Japan. So they were not only controlling the GDP part, but they were also controlling the major exports of the world. So almost around 45% of the total exports in the globe were done by these countries. So this was the alignment what was there in our old world order, what we call it as. So suddenly there is a change which has taken place because of this virus. So now there is a new world order which has started emerging, and there is a reshuffle in the number of countries which were participating in this new world order. So earlier, one of the best thing what was there in the world order of the old precedents was, there was absolutely a close, monitored, tight relationship which existed between the countries which were forming the world order. Like US and Canada had a good relationship with Japan and China, unless and until there was some trade-related barriers which started erupting after Trump administration came into power in US. Before that, they had a very good relationship. China had a very good relationship with US. And Japan had a very good relationship with US, and similarly US had a very good relationship with Japan and China. And there was a very good relationship between European Union and European countries and US. Similarly, there was a very good relationship between European countries with Japan and China along with Japan had a very good relationship with European Union. So to say, there was a close contested relationship which existed between all these countries, and there was a formal group of associations under which these people were working with. But suddenly today, because of this virus, there is a dismantling of the economic relationship. One thing what we need to understand seriously about this COVID-19 is, it is not only a virus which has infected the total health system of globe, but it has at the same time impacted social, political, and economic relationship also between various countries. So having said so, the relationship today, we are going into a different world order which has started emerging from few years before COVID-19 itself. Since many of us know the penetration of China, I'm not talking about Chinese people, I'm talking about the Chinese regime in particular. Because Chinese people, even today, they are known for their innovative ideas, their skill set, and their level of expression and all those things. Still people across the globe accept Chinese culture and all. But the problem is with today's regime, what is there in China, which is ruling China, that people of the globe is not happy with them. So, having said so, we need to bear it in mind, but this virus has created a large gap, especially in economic, political, and social fronts. this is where the new alignment has taken place. And the new alignment, that is new world order, what we are talking about today, consists of three major countries. So European Union has vanished today. We know what has happened to European Union countries, including United Kingdom. So today they are not the major strategic partners in the global context. So today, European Union is not considered as one of the important organizational groups to make decisions or to take decisions in order to face the eventualities because of their own efforts and negligence, which resulted in their being backtracked. So today, whatever we are talking about, the three important countries are India, United States, and China. These are the three countries which are there today as a new world order, where we three countries needs to unite together and fight whatever the situation which comes in future, whether it is relating to COVID or whether it is relating to the recession, where the World Bank has observed and told day before yesterday that this will be one of the worst recession in the last 13 recession which the world has witnessed since 1870 onwards. So we will be getting into a very harsh recession, we can call it as, and we don't know till when this recession will last. And since this is a pandemic, this is something which has impacted the entire globe. So there is nothing called as these countries have been favored, or these countries will be becoming rich countries, or these countries will be dominating in the coming years. Nothing like that. There is a major suffering which has happened to all the countries in the economic front, social front, and also on managing the people front also. So having said so, today these three countries, what we are talking about, the new world order countries, if you see the relationship between what these countries enjoy, it is little bit of worrisome. What is this worrying matter in this relationship between these three countries? Let us take the example of India and US. See, today India and US is one of the closest and highly reputed cooperating countries across the globe today. So before this pandemic happened, India used to reach to US for everything. So you can see various diplomatic measures what the government of India took when it went and met the US president. And US president also wants Indians' cooperation and Indian relationship, because Indians' population is now becoming major population in US. Since because of their political thing and for also economical front, because India is one of the largest strategic partners in terms of IT related business with US, and majority of the Indians work with US companies in US, and they are contributing towards the growth because US is dominated as a service sector country. Services dominate in their GDP there. So US also looks towards India for a lot of things. And of course, Indian exports, majority of the exports of software related products are to US only. So we enjoy today a positive type of relationship when it comes to the question of India and US, and in turn US with India. So this we have seen n number of times. And the major change or major twist in that strategy, what we can see today is, earlier India used to go to US and India used to have a relationship with US. Today it's just the same type, but it's a reverse order which is working, where US wants relationship with India today. US wants to move closer to India today. So you can see in the case of the sending of 100 ventilators to India. We know that India was not a good manufacturer of ventilators earlier to this COVID-19. Almost more than 95% of our ventilators were imported. We never used to go for manufacturing ventilators, but after this COVID, we have come across a pandemic situation where we are forced to now go for manufacturing ventilators that we have become successful today. So that is one big learning what we have done, and that is what post-COVID has taught us, especially in order to change our manufacturing related style and way of looking into business. So that is not the topic which I will be addressing now. So the other part is the pushing of military defense, especially the helicopter. So the defense deal which India had signed with US to send the helicopters to India, and India has placed order for some 24 helicopters. And seeing the way the Chinese are moving, or how the Chinese are planning to create some tension in Asian country, especially keeping in mind India, US has suddenly moved its submarine, and three important helicopters have been defined, and three important helicopters has been already dispatched to India in order to safeguard the Indian Pacific Ocean coast, especially from any misadvent what is supposed to be caused by China. So this has taken place at a very fast rate, and this is because of the self-interference of US with India. India did not request for these ventilators, and also India did not request for helping US in sending that submarine, anti-submarine helicopters and all those things. It was not asked for, but this is purely a diplomatic move from US side to favor India and to be in the closer look with India. That's the objective with which US moved those things to India. So that is one point which we should not forget. So that means India and China, US has a very good positive relationship both way. Okay, that is one point. Second point, let me talk about the relationship between China and US. I think most of you know, before COVID itself, US was not happy with the Chinese trade. There were a lot of trade barriers and trade wars which were fought between US and China. And this had become a very, continuous issue, where China used to place some trade restrictions on US. Simultaneously, again, US will come up with some trade restrictions on China. So there were series of trade wars which started erupting because China today holds majority of the US dollars. That is one of the reasons why US is worried about China, because majority of the US dollars is held by China, and Chinese foreign reserves in terms of US dollar is more than what US is holding themselves there. So this is strategically pushed US to see that they follow some restriction and try to protect their domestic economy by taking some strict action against Chinese trade. And that is the reason why the embargo of trade restrictions was practiced on this particular Chinese products and services which used to be imported to China. So US doesn't enjoy a very good relationship with China. And in post-COVID, in the COVID era, you might have seen in the newspaper the various comments which are coming from US Embassy on Chinese, especially in terms of Chinese students visa, or in terms of WHO related issues, where US has told that it will be pulling out of WHO. It doesn't want, because WHO's major contribution is coming from US. And US has told that it will stop all aid to China, WHO, and it wants to just end the relationship of itself with WHO. The main reason because is WHO did not take necessary action against China, which did not provide sufficient information of this Wuhan virus, which has today infected the entire globe. So they did not relieve the information, or they did not provide the sufficient information about the virus being spreading endemically during those point of time in China, which later become pandemic. So US is not happy with how the China behaved, and there is also some conspiracy theories which are going beyond, where they are saying this particular virus is something which emanated from Wuhan University Research Center, and this is a man-made virus, not a virus which has come from some animal or bird. So there is some lot of thought about process which is going on, and a lot of theories are unfolding. We need to wait for some time, because this is not the right time to focus on those issues. First and foremost thing is protecting the people and protecting the nation against this pandemic is one of the foremost objective today. So we have seen a lot of restrictions being placed and a lot of open word exchange between the US and the China. And US has also formed a group which is sending the deliberations to United Nations and also to China, warning them with serious consequences if they don't come out with the actual background of how this virus is spread and all those things. So that is going on at a strategic meeting level. So there will be definitely some sanctions, and there will be definitely consequences to China in the coming months. And that is the fact today. China is having a negative relationship with US, and at the same time, US also is having negative relationship with China. So coming back to the third relationship, China and India. So this is a very interesting relationship, especially with what is happening in Ladakh and other parts of northeastern states, and how Nepal is behaving today, especially with the three important land areas where the passes, land areas and passes where the dispute is. You can easily see China is now wants to push something in India in order to see that they are in the limelight. Why they should be in the limelight? They should be in the limelight because entire world is against them. They want to show their presence today. That is how the communist regime works. Okay, so even though they know that entire globe is not accepting their version of the efforts what they put in to fight this virus and all those things, the globe, especially almost around 52 countries, have formed a union, and they are suing China for whatever the misdeed it has created across the globe today. So this is one thing which we need to look into, and because of that, China simply is interfering in other areas, creating boundary issues and all those things. And this is a very important strategic thing, and even you can see the statements what is coming from the Indian sides in the last 2 days. So nowhere India is also not bowing to what China is talking about. They are telling that they want to engage not with military actions, better to have a diplomatic talks, and that should be given the top priority. So we have already 2 level of meetings which has happened and Chinese have agreed to maintain the status quo on the land which was already there, and they want to go back to the April 2019 situation, 20 situation, what we were sharing the land and the disputed areas. So that is the standstill position what they're doing. But again, there are some news which are coming up saying that they are mounting their military thing and all in that border areas. This is only to create some tension. This is only to divert the nations from this pandemic. Okay, there is nothing called a strategic thing what China will be aiming to do with these type of things, because China knows that if it venture into any of these type of adventurous activities, definitely the world will come together and China need to face strict resistance from the global community, and we don't know what will happen to China if such type of ventures are launched, especially in interfering in India's internal matters and all those things. So it is only tactics for deviating the mindset of people from Corona to the strategic military things. China is not willing to do anything because, again, if you see what is happening in Taiwan and what is happening in Tibet and Hong Kong. So what US did with Hong Kong and Tibet, and how people in Hong Kong and Tibet are protesting to get themselves freed from Chinese occupation there, is something which is also worrying China. Earlier, Russia was considered as one of the Chinese partner, but today we see that even Russia is also told openly. The Putin government has clearly told that in case of any aggression by China on India, Russia will be supporting India and not China. This is an open statement made last week by the Russian president. And today, this is where the relationship between China and India stands. So India doesn't want to go for aggressive mode with China. And China also doesn't want to go aggressive mode with India. It is just only it's a diplomatic tactics what China is adopting. And we know already in the last 1 year, 2 times Chinese president had come to India. And Indian Prime Minister has also visited China, and they have talked about various matters. And today China is one of the largest importers to India. And India also has some good export market with China for various things. So if you ask the relationship between China and India today, we have a balanced relationship. That's very, very important, because for India, China and US needs to be looked at in the same weight. We need to have a balanced approach when it comes to China and also when it comes to US, because we should not get into any sort of arguments or any sort of misadventures with these two countries. And today, the relationship between China and India is almost balanced relationship, where both parties are in a position to sit together and sort out any differences and issues which are there. So the dispute is something what is arising in Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, or in the Aksai Chin area, in the Ladakh part and all those things. These are all long pending border issue which could have been solved, but these were kept as an issue by our old prime ministers who ruled our country for so many years. No one was interested to solve these issues. They kept this problem continuing. Sometimes they went into United Nations also and created big nonsense out of border disputes. This could have been sorted out long back, but because of the inefficient prime ministership or diplomacy, what they disclosed at that point of time, today we are suffering with these type of disputes, which is continuing further to raise some tension in countries' relationship. So this is the new world order today. New world order today is India, US and China, where India and US enjoys positive relationship mutually, and US and China enjoys totally negative relationship, and India and China enjoys balanced relationship. So we have plus, minus and balance. So this is an important combination which is there. So this combination is something which is which is a very good combination, especially for a country like India, which can think of moving towards the new development focus. Coming back to India, what are the gains for India? That's very important, because today's topic is on the new economic order and how it benefits India. So coming back to what are the benefits what India will be getting from this new economic order. The first and foremost thing is we need to look into the another set of cooperation which India is trying to establish apart from India, US and China. So the other type of relationship which is emerging is with GEC nations, that is Gulf Economic Cooperation countries. This is very important council or cooperation council, we can call it as, which consists of 7 important Gulf nations. So it is Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Iran, and all these 7 countries which are framing very important relationship, which is the strategic business partners for India in the coming years. So all these years, what happened with these GEC countries, we all know that next to gold, oil was one of the important demanded products globally. So it is called as oil standard. Once the gold lost its standard and dollar became the standard across the globe, people were looking for what should be the next substitute standard which can fill the position of gold. Then people thought it should be oil, because oil is one thing which is establishing all the countries' currencies. And that is a major demanding product across the globe. I am talking about crude oil. So one point of time, they were ready to make this crude oil as one of the medium of exchanges globally. And they wanted to fix the standard according to the crude oil movements, demand and supply. But later, in the stages when the climate issue came up, when most of the countries thought of saying goodbye to this oil and to move towards renewable energy in order to save themselves from the environmental damages and to go themselves green, the oil market as such started falling. And today, because of OPEC, that is Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, there is a serious war which is going on internally between the member nation, especially the Russia and Saudi Arabia, and these frequent wars which are taking place in those regions, in Syria or in Iraq and Kuwait and all those countries. It has become very much irrelevant today to talk about oil. All of you may be aware of how the Brent prices came down in the last 2 months and how the entire globe witnessed the sudden dip in the price of oil and also the oil futures. So that those things still is continuing today. Today, I think yesterday the Brent crude closed at $42. So once it has gone up to 75 to 80, today it is closing at 42. Earlier it was at 35 and 15, 17 and all it came. So in the last 3 months, even though there is no demand for this oil products because of lockdown in major countries, most of the countries went for lockdown. And during those time, the consumption of oil was very less. And due to that, the price stabilization could not happen. So the countries were forced to bring down their prices. So the international market for oil has collapsed. And people are now moving towards more renewable energies, electric vehicle, car, and all those things. People are shifting towards a new renewable energy. And a lot of countries in Europe have already started going for green energy, where they are totally putting ban on coal and fossil fuels. So in the next couple of years, the demand for oil will come down drastically. And this has pushed these GCC nations to now think of alternative things. So now they have started moving into a lot of various other avenues of business. They have now started about going for investments in various tourism projects, hotel industries, and some infrastructure projects have been taken up there. They are inviting even a lot of companies to come and do business there. So there is drastically a change in the activities of how things needs to be looked out, especially in those Gulf countries. So even though we know that they follow Shariat law, a strict law, now they are going towards the verge of relaxing those laws in order to make themselves competitive in the global market. So country like Saudi Arabia has gone for relaxation of a lot of their own Shariat laws, and now they have started inducting and even encouraging women to take up a lot of business avenues which are flowing in their directions. So that can be in the form of becoming a car driver, or pushing them to start their own entrepreneurship, or making them self-sufficient by encouraging them to do business, or getting themselves elected in their representation. That's also very important thing. So there is a too much of now freedom which has been given under their own Shariat laws, where even women are also being treated equally with men. And this never happened 5 years back. So this is something which is changing in those Gulf Economic Cooperation nation, and their relationship with India is extremely, today we can say that we have a very positive relationship with them, especially country like UAE, Saudi Arabia, and the countries like Kuwait. So they have stood with us in a lot of issues, and we have also supported them. I'll come back to those things in my later presentation. I will be talking about those things also. So we have supported them with a lot of initiatives, especially in the post-COVID, this COVID-19 situation. We have supported them, and also they are also supporting us them in terms of investments and all those things. So a lot of investments are also coming from this GCC nations to India, and especially in terms of ratifying the trade and terms contracts in relation to the export of software related products, or in terms of export of our agriculture and agriculture produce and garments. See, there is a huge demand for these type of products, and we are importing a lot of things from them, especially the dates and all those things. So that type of export exchange relationship is happening between India and the GCC nation. Not only this, in terms of services also, it can be financial services or accounting services or ITES related services. India is equipping the GCC nations, especially in building up robust technology and also building up new business chains.
Sir, it has been unmuted. Sir, it has been muted. Sir, it has been muted. Your voice is not audible.
Yeah, now you can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think by auto, I don't know how it went off. Okay. So that is one thing which we need to now be looking at. That is GCC country. They are one of the major partners today with India, and they will be our future partners, especially in terms of what the future new world order, what we will be talking about, right? So they will be one of our strategic partners whom India should maintain a close relationship. So the diplomatic relationship, what the continuously our MEA is doing, that is Ministry of External Affairs, presently what the relationship they are carrying with them, and also of the past when Madam was there, she also maintained a very good relation. Sushma Swaraj was the earlier Ministry of External Affairs. She also maintained a very good cordial relationship with UAE and other countries. So we might have seen how the people thanked when they were bought from Syrian war and all those things, how Indian people were evacuated from there by cooperating with this GCC countries in order to arrange for shifting those people from the war-ridden Syria and all those countries. that is during the ISIS war and all those things. So the support what these countries had extended to India is highly commendable thing, and that still continues. And that type of relationship is what needs to be continued with these countries. India has a very positive relationship with the GCC countries. So Bahrain, Kuwait, and all those countries I'm talking about. There are 7 countries which are there in that Middle East part. So we are having a very good relationship with them. Even when the Pakistan was raising the issue of the Kashmir after this abrogation of 370, Article 370 in OIC, that is Organization of Islamic Countries, right? These people told, don't bring those, it's an internal matter of India. Don't bring that case into OIC. See, that is one of the biggest achievement of the diplomatic relationship what India has with GCC countries. So totally in Organization of Islamic Countries, Pakistan was neutralized. They did not, they told Pakistan not to bring such issues in the OIC meet. So that is a strong diplomatic relationship what India has built with these GCC countries. And they are one of the very strategic points for India in the coming years. So we have a very positive relationship that is very good for India. Then coming back to the contribution of GST in the today's world. So today we have US contributing almost towards 23% of global GDP, and China contributes around 20% of global GDP. That means 43% of global GDP is from these 2 countries, US and China. So India is contributing around 2.4 or 2.5% of global GDP. So total put together around 46% of global GDP will be from these countries. These 3 countries will have 47% of global GDP. So this is one of the biggest thing, because 3 countries controlling the entire 230 nations across the globe means something which is remarkable. That means we have, as a strategic countries, we will be pushing towards more cordial relationship in the coming years, especially in delivering the strategic things what needs to come up, especially in terms of mutual relationship and trade and business and economy and all those things. Then coming back to what the US Secretary General had told on April 29th, very important point he told, and this is something which needs to be, I think most of you might have seen or read in newspaper and all those things. He mentioned a point, that is Michael Palm, he is the US Secretary of State. He made a point that he called India to be one of the key strategic partner to drive the global supply chain. This is the word what he used. He invited India and he wanted to make India a leading country to lead that particular initiative of creating a global supply chain involving all the developed and developing countries of the world. So this is openly told, and it's on record, that the US Secretary of State made this point in the White House, talking about that India should take the lead. It is time now has come where India should take a lead, and that is the level of confidence what the diplomatic relationship has ensured with most of the countries what India is enjoying today. There was a lot of criticism couple of years back, especially by our opposition parties. They told that Prime Minister should be called as an NRI Prime Minister, that is non-resident Indian Prime Minister, because he spends most of his time abroad rather than in India. See, if he had not spent so much time in abroad during those days, we could not have engaged, or we could not have become such a strategic partner where globe is thinking that without India, nothing can move. So today we are in that position. That position has come into place because of so much of relationship what India established during the last 4 to 5 years of the present government and also the previous government. So it is a real diplomatic win what India has ensured in last 4 years. especially with bigger countries and across all the countries of the globe. That's very important. We are maintaining that good relationship. So we are going back to our ancient wisdom thought, which talked about Vasudeva Kutumbakam. So we are doing that today. Entire world is one place, and that's what our concept talked about, and that's what we are also trying to do today. And this virus has brought that particular wordings in Sanskrit to become reality. So that is what we can say today. Then coming back to our Honorable Prime Minister, who talked about last month when he talked about the lockdown period and about the economic stimulus package, he made one point which is very important and very relevant for India. He told, make in India, make for world. This is something which is very important. The wordings are in two different areas now. First is localization. Make in India is localization. Made for world is globalization. See, earlier the concept of 1991 post reforms, we never focused on localization. We only thought about globalization, but we were not successful in that also, because majority of the times after 1991, India went in for coalition politics. Majority of the time, we saw 17 parties coming together and forming a government, and that resulted in a lot of mess, because different parties with different ideologies came together and they never used the benefit of the 1991 LPG movement, what was given by our Honorable Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao ji, would not be implemented or adopted in fullest sense because of coalition politics, which ruled the entire ambition of globalization. Even though we talked about globalization, we became prey of globalization, but our domestic industries could not grow because of globalization. We only went for many imports, but we did not go for export promotion. So larger imports destroyed our domestic markets, and we were left with a lot of internal issues where our exchange markets were not picking properly. Our trade deficit went for huge turmoil. Even though there was a GDP growth rate, the majority growth rate came because of three important factors. One is real estate, another is gold. So gold and real estates were the major contribution towards the GDP at that point of time. And for your kind information, these two things, one is gold, the other one real estate, never contributes towards employment generation. So the other factor was stock market. I did not tell the third one, it is stock market. So stock market, gold and real estate were the three important things which flourished during the GDP growth rate of 7.2 and 8%. So India showed that as a projecting figure that Indian economy is doing good, but unemployment problem was there at that point of time also. And today also we see this unemployment problem scaling up, because of not practicing or bringing the advantages of globalization. And the major factor which was left behind was exports. We never concentrated on exports. So that was a big failure of the successive governments which came up. And today there is a chance for us to rebound back. So the word statement, what has been made by our Honorable Prime Minister, make in India, make for world, it's a very important tool which we need to think in a different direction. One is localization is important. That will provide a lot of employment opportunity, because India enjoys a huge demographic dividend where the youth population is more, that is youth and working population is more compared to any other countries in the world today. So we have a demographic dividend which will continue for next 35 years, that is till 2055, we will be having the same demographic dividend. And this is one of the very important point, because demographic dividend acts like a double-edged sword. If you don't use this advantage in a proper way, right, it creates a lot of disadvantages. So unemployment problem is something which is emerging, which is already there today. We are facing this issue, but only thing what I would like to say here is unemployment, if it is not managed properly, it will create still more problem for India because our youth population is high. So when I talk about employability, our skill sets are not up to the standard, up to the mark what is expected in the global standards. So if you go back and see, some person asked some last week, Tim Cook, who is the CEO of Apple, they asked him, when other countries are thinking of moving their IT and all the industries from China to other countries, even Apple is trying to move their companies, products and services from China to some other countries. They asked the question to Tim Cook, who is the CEO of Apple. The immediate reply what CEO gave is that, see, we are in a position in India, we are comfortably placed in the country like India, here, where China has a better comparatively in terms of skill sets, where we don't find such type of skill sets anywhere in the globe. This is what he told. There is no comparative for China in terms of innovation and technology and the skill sets what they practice. There is no replacement anywhere in the world about their skill sets. So they told that it will be a very difficult decision for us to make if we think of moving our industries from China to other countries. So there are around 2 million iOS app developers in China. If you give them the idea, they will develop it within a day or two. That is the type of commitment what Chinese have given to IT industry. So even such type of skill sets are not there in India today. And that is something which needs to be focused, and I'll not get into details of that because that is not a part of today's deliberation what I'm doing it here. So that is one thing which we need to talk about. The second important international relationship what India is enjoying today is, you might have seen in a lot of newspaper and in a lot of media interactions and all those things, there is a plan to reconstitute these G7 nations. They are taking this G7 is no more a G7 because there is a change in the world order today. We need to include 4 important countries now. Apart from the existing G7 list, what we are having, we need to reconstitute that G7 and we need to include another 4 countries and make it G11 nations. So what are the 4 countries they are talking about? One is they are talking about India. Second, they are talking about Australia. Third, they are talking about Russia. And fourth, they are talking about South Korea. So these are the 4 countries. If we don't involve these 4 countries, then our list of G7 is not practical. That's what they're telling. It's not full. It's not complete. That's what the point they've made. So now there is a proposal to bring even India under G11 nations. So G11 nations, you know that they are the top 11 nations which will be doing all the strategic decision points at the global level. So now India is also getting a good recognition and place in G11 nation. So last year, Prime Minister was invited into G7 nation to deliver a talk. So see, that is a type of diplomatic relationship what India has enjoyed. So even though India is not a member of G7 nation, but Prime Minister was invited and he was asked to give his opinion and suggestions and deliberation in the G7 meet on climate change and all those things. So they have started recognizing India as a potential strategic partner in the international arena. And this is one of the new world order change which is taken place in the recent years. And it will be continuing in the coming years also. And the next one I want to talk about is about very important points I'll discuss on. The population increase across the globe is one of the important factors which is resulting in strategic moves taken by different countries in different parameters. especially the increase in population has created more opportunities in terms of demand. They have created huge demand in various sectors. So this is one positive area which India also should focus upon. So overall global population has gone up. So there are various segments of populations which is seeing a tremendous changes. And this is one of the biggest opportunity which is coming in the years, where we need to cater to the demand and supply of meeting those population increase challenges. So definitely there is a lot of opportunities in terms of resources management, resource utilization, and helping those countries in becoming strategic partners in the global arena. So I think this is where the contribution of India will be looked for by the global countries. Next is increasing middle class population. That is one more thing in the new market. There is quite number of increase which has taken place in terms of middle-aged people or middle class people, we can call it as, not age, middle class people. So across the globe, the population of middle class has seen a tremendous growth. This has resulted in creating lot of activities, especially because they are the people who are the huge consumers. They are the people who consume, in India, middle class people consume almost 53% of non-essential products. So when we talk about consumer durables, when we talk about services, when we talk about any electronic products or electronic services or whatever it is, the food products or whatever it is, they are the people, middle class people are those people who show lot of demand trends. They are the people who are the demand setters especially. So catering to the need of middle class people, especially who have a lot of wants to be satisfied. So they are the huge market which will be opening up for the entire globe in the coming years. So India definitely will have a good opportunity in order to cater to the needs and demands of such people. Then geopolitical changes. So as we have already discussed much of that, I will not get into too much of that again and again. So what is India's advantage? Okay, India's advantage may be wrapped up in various form. One is, the biggest advantage is we have a very good diplomatic relationship with different countries. That is one of the strategic points which is pushing us to be the global leaders. Second one is big consumer market. That is one more important thing. India has a very good consumer market. So we have all types of people, and especially 63% of our population is in the middle class. And I think this is one of the biggest target group which can withstand the India's competitiveness in the global market, because demand and consumption is one of the important factors for any economy to grow. So unless and until we push this to our consumption factors goes up, by creating demand, will not be able to generate employment or will not be able to create more and more job opportunities by setting up a lot of companies. So this is one of the greatest advantage what India has today, and we need to cater to this requirement and need. Then there is a huge scope for infrastructure development. See, coming back to any global countries, advanced countries you talk about, so they have a very good infrastructure facilities. What is this infrastructure facilities? Infrastructure is nothing but your capex, capital expenditures, in the form of good roads, national highways, in the form of rural roads, rural infrastructure, or in form of bridges, dams, water connectivity, water resources, energy resources, all these things. See, this is one of the huge opportunities which are there for India to still expand. Our infrastructure is not up to the mark of global standard till now. Even though we have a separate budget allocation for infrastructure, for national highways, for rural roads, for building ports, building airports and all those things. But end of the day, the contribution of these particular things towards infrastructure development is not happening. The best classic example is about smart city projects. So this smart city projects was started 4 years back, but today we still don't see that smart cities being coming up in India. And this is purely because of a lot of political and other factors, which is having as an hindrances in the process of developing the cities. So I think this is the right time for us, because we are becoming a strategic hub in the global market. We need to spend a lot of money. We need to invest a lot of money in infrastructure project, especially the roads, national highways, and also the rural infrastructure in the form of rural roads, rural connectivity, rural infrastructure, and of course, smart city projects and all those things. We need to have a very good, comfortable buildings with high sophisticated technology used in those buildings. We need to have a very good town planning system. We need to have a very good industrial hubs. We need to plan for economic zones. We need to have good ports, both seaports and airports. See, all these things are matter of concern. Thanks for this year budget, where Madam had clearly talked about increasing the airports and increasing the national highways and bringing a lot of new ports into the system and all those things. But due to COVID, they have put a hold on all these things. That's what I saw in the newspaper 5 days back. They have told that they'll be putting hold on all these projects, and this because COVID has become the priority, and we need to now address the COVID as a main issue. So we'll push money for those sectors and will not disturb the earlier sector, what was told in the budget proposal. So now I think we should not worry about the fiscal deficit. So the concept of maintaining fiscal deficit at 3.6, 3.7, those things needs to be removed now, because there is a huge chance for India to bounce back now. And we need to spend a lot of money in infrastructure development, especially in the form of capital outlay, where we push a lot of money into these sectors and start creating job. Please remember, infrastructure is one activity which can create lakhs of jobs. So this is one area which can create jobs not only in urban areas but also in rural areas. So why I'm pushing this rural area concept here? Because of migration. You people may be aware of that 60 lakh people have migrated back to their villages because of this COVID-19. 60 lakh people have gone back to their natives. So we need to create a push in the rural economy now. Even though Manrega is doing great efforts now in order to push the rural infrastructure, but that is not the pace at which we need to aim at now. We need to aim at a very bigger space, especially in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. We need to still plan it in a better way. We need to create a lot of industrial hubs. We need to open a lot of economic zones and EOUs. And for this, we need to allocate a lot of funds, especially for bringing the economy back, because this is one sector which can create a lot of jobs. So when jobs are created, ultimately consumption and demand will push to the next level. So more demand and consumption, the GDP will grow. So this is a concept which we need to think seriously and we need to work with. And the next India's strategic point is on digital. We are the digital hub. Digital talent is huge in India. Just let me give you a small example of why we did not take care of such things. When Zoom was, if you see the usage of Zoom in the month of Jan, it was only 1 crore people used to use Zoom. But in the month of April, if you see how many people used to use Zoom, it was 30 crore people were using Zoom. Okay, that is because of lockdown and all online, all those things. Okay, we'll forget. See the tremendous opportunities which are coming up in those areas. Why India, even though it's a big IT hub, why we are not taking up those challenges? Why India is not taking up this IT or digital revolution in a very good spirit? We are doing it good in terms of making bank transfer, bank payment, all those things. Yes, digital payments, fintech and all those things we are doing. But what about innovation? What about creativity? What about bringing new apps which can be helpful for India? Why we are depending on foreign countries for these apps and these sites? Why there is no WhatsApp which is equivalent to Indian WhatsApp? Why don't we develop Facebook type of app which can run the system here? See, these are the small things which Indian people also should think of. So we need to become more innovative going forward, because the world is looking at us. We need to become more innovators. We need to have our own space in the international arena, especially when it comes to the question of technology. So we are good enough working for IBM. We are telling that Indians are heading Google, Indians are heading Oracle, or Indians are heading IBM and all those things we are talking about. But they are not owners of IBM. They are not owners of, they are only CEOs. They are not owners of that particular companies. See, ownership should come. That's very important. We need to push for new entrepreneurship where they can take a lead and become the top class people across the globe, especially in technology front. So China has done it. So that is what India should also do it now. Then soft power and self-image is one thing which India enjoys. So what is this soft power and self-image? See, India has a very good, clear history over past so many years. So this is a country which has not gone and with aggression with any countries. We have not interfered in any disputes, or we have not created any disputes, or we are not aligned with those countries which cause disputes and all. So India has been recognized as a soft country with self-image. We have a very good image in global market because of our positions in various terms and in various times also. So the diplomatic relationship what India enjoys, we will not get meddled into, even let it be a LTT issue in Sri Lanka, or it can be some terrorist related issues in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. See, till now India has not gone for any type of aggressive or aggressional role in the international politics, and we are not gone and sidelined with those countries which are forming groups and starting waging war against another countries. See, we have not done all these things. We have a very clear hand. We have a very clear policies. We are liked by the entire globe today. So that is one positive characteristics of India as a self-image, which has made us to be globally accepted as a country which can drive the global factors today. So that is clear image what India is having, and the soft image what we are talking about. So we have not gone for aggression. We have not waged any war with again another country, or we have not claimed that this is our territory. We will get back with all those. See, we have whatever the issues are there, we have diplomatically handled it. We have followed the rules and regulations and procedures, and we have not interfered in any country's violence and all those things. So there are a lot of issues in Bangladesh. We did not interfere in Bangladesh to solve those issues. So except in the East Bangladesh Liberation War, right? India supported because Bangladesh asked for it. So that is, India did not go and support directly Bangladesh. Bangladesh requested for India's help, and it was a genuine case where they wanted to liberate because of cultural issues. So that is how India went and supported Bangladesh. But till today, India has not entered or meddled into any type of issues with any other neighboring countries, or it can be across the globe also. So that is one of the positive factor which has made India to reach at this level today. So that is one thing. And to conclude, I will just talk something about COVID-19, what India did especially. This is very important. Most of you should know about this. This COVID-19 situation, what we are in today now, India followed a very proactive approach. So India, before the world thought about all these things, India was proactively driving these forces. So even though it was a problem situation in India, but apart from addressing Indian issue, even we took the issue into a broader stage where we started addressing the international arena. So when all the countries of the globe were busy in addressing their crisis, which has arisen because of this COVID, India took a lead in bringing all these nations together in order to have a common platform to face these global issues. So let me say where they did it, especially in case of supplying the anti-malaria drug. So see, India supplied anti-malaria drug and also pharmacy assistance, especially in Middle East countries. I was talking about Middle East countries, right? GCC nation. So India supplied almost to 85 countries. See, this is one of the biggest diplomatic achievements of India during during COVID situation. India supplied pharmacy related things like they supplied medicines, testing kits, and also they supplied a lot of infrastructure things relating to that particular testing things and all those things. Plus, even they supplied that anti-malaria drug, hydroxychloroquine, something it was there, right? So that they supplied to more than 80 nations. So this was a very important remedial measure in at least bringing the COVID under control. So India was appreciated because we had enough storage of this drug at our capacity, and since US told us, initially they warned us, but later India replied back by saying that yes, they are ready to supply these drugs to entire world. And this came as a helping hand, or like Sanjeevani, to many of the countries, especially in addressing their COVID-19, which was spreading like anything in those countries. So that is one of the biggest diplomatic relationship what India showed during COVID-19. The second one is about sending medical professionals. See, a lot of medical professionals, including doctors, have been sent to various global health engagements. So India has become part of that assistance program, where the global health engagements have been carried out in various countries, especially in countries where there is no such well-equipped medical facilities and all those things. So India has sent professional doctors, or medical doctors, medical professionals have been sent into those places. Then Indian military doctors, they are doing a wonderful job actually, especially in countries like Nepal, Maldives, and Kuwait. So Indian medical military doctors are also assisting in these countries, especially in addressing the viral pandemic. So they are creating awareness. They have started their own small helping clinics there, and they are testing people, and they are supporting in various ways in order to see that the pandemic doesn't rise beyond the controllable limits. So that is one thing what they've done. And the Prime Minister's efforts to have a virtual SAARC meeting, that is Association of Southeast Asian Nation Countries. So Prime Minister ensured that they will conduct the virtual meeting of these SAARC countries, which is a very important thing, where even Pakistan also participated in that, and also raised some of the COVID-related issues. And it was a very nice thing, where the Prime Minister also advised about what are the various steps they can take in order to prevent this virus and all those things. See, bringing together in terms of crisis is very important. Forgetting all the differences what we have at the rest of the time, and when people are dying, it is time for us to come together. So that is something what was advocated by India. India took the lead in starting all these things, forgetting about whatever the diplomatic or the political situation what they are into, or whatever the area disputes what they are having. So they forgot all those things, and virtual meeting of SAARC countries, they wanted to ensure that the continuity of this relationship should exist. So that is very important in diplomatic relationship. Continuity of relationship is very important. That was ensured, that was entrusted by the Prime Minister when he organized the virtual SAARC meet due to COVID-19 issues. And the other one was the biggest achievement was on Indian Member of Parliament, Shri Harshavardhan, was taken into the World Health Organization Executive Director Board Member. So that was one of the biggest achievement. Now World Health Organization has started recognizing India immediately after US started withdrawing from WHO, right? Now they thought that, okay, India can do the balancing act, because India is good with US, India is also equally good with China. So why don't we take India and see that we balance the WHO equation? Because WHO knows that they cannot survive without US funds. US is a major contributor for WHO. So they know that US, if it is going out, then the major power of WHO will be lost. And we don't know the continuity of WHO will happen or not, because US withdrawing so much huge grants to WHO means it's literally lost for WHO to exist. So that is the strategic move what they found, and they thought that yes, by involving India and giving them some top positions in WHO, we can have a consultation process with the US also, and try to see that we get back US into WHO, and we start functioning with the objectives under which we were set up with. So that is one thing which we need to appreciate. And the next one was about the international community lauded our achievements, basically because of the push what the government has done. So one of the important things what India made in the recent years is especially they have taken the former IFS officer, Indian Foreign Service officer, as a person to head the MEA. So all these years, we never used to have a person who has a very good understanding about the relationship matters. See, it's not like pushing someone who has passed 10th or who doesn't have any experience in external relationship, right? You cannot just put that member of parliament to become a minister of external affairs. So that is what usually we used to do all these years. So, but this time, the government came up with a very good move where they took this former IFS officer who had served as an ambassador and bureaucrat at various ministries in external affairs to become a minister to look after this external affairs matter, because they knew that this is the right time and the right point where we need to expose ourselves to the global world. So they appointed Jai Shankar. He was elected also. He became a Rajya Sabha member also. So he was elected. He resigned his service and he got elected into the Ministry of External Affairs as the Minister of External Affairs. And that was a very good strategic move what India did, because now putting people who have strong knowledge and who have a strong capability of building relationship with different countries and how to handle the situation is a very important thing. So I think the diplomats are quite comfortable because they know in and out of how the procedure works through. So that was a very great move which was done. And another important point which I need to talk about, 2 points I'll make and I'll close my presentation. The very important point which I need to talk about is the Indo-Pacific relationship and ASEAN relationship. So these are the 2 important relationships which is very much required, because when we are talking about the globe, how the globe will be changing in the coming years, India, even though China and India will be the major countries, but India, there are Asia-specific or Asia-centric countries which are very important. So what are these Asia-centric countries? Asia-centric countries are Philippines, Manila, Philippines, and Singapore, Thailand, and the other one country which I missed it. Okay, Thailand and one more country is there. So these are the 5 countries which are very important, which plays a very important role, especially in the next level of migration which happens from either China or some other countries across the globe, because more investments are flowing into these countries. So whenever the companies are trying to move from China to other parts of the world, right? So the first destination hub, what they're looking is Southeast Asian countries. So this Philippines, Manila, Thailand, and Singapore. So these are the countries which are getting a lot of new orders. New opening ups are coming up here because of their infrastructure facilities, because of their cost, and because of the high skilled people who are working there, and all those things. So India should engage these people also. So Southeast Asian countries called as ASEAN, we have something called as ASEAN, right? Association of Southeast Asian Nation. So India today have a very good relationship with the ASEAN also. So if you go back and remember 2018 Republic Day parade, 10 presidents of these countries, ASEAN countries, participated in the Republic Day parade. They were the chief guest for this Republic Day parade. And this was a very good strategic move, because India should consider these people also, because they are all strong frontiers which can even block China from doing some mischief in those Indian Ocean and all those areas. So the Pacific belt is very important for India, because China has already started constructing a lot of naval bases in those regions which are close by, located to Chinese islands. So these countries, if you are maintaining good relationship, right, they will be in a position to bar China from doing any misadventure to India. So that is the relationship. And these countries, it enjoys more than 2,500 years of relationship. We know these islands, right? Most of the countries, like Indonesia, example. So Indonesia, even though it's a Muslim country, and a lot of its culture are driven from Indian culture itself. And Malaysia, if you know, a lot of people are there with Indian origin who are there in Malaysia, and even Cambodia, you know, Bali Islands. See, all these islands are again enjoying around 2,500 years of relationship with India, and bringing them culturally, bringing them commercefully, that is in commerce line, is also very important. And that is what exactly the ASEAN nations have been doing to India. and India is taking care of these ASEAN nations also. And the last point is about the relationship with Australia. India and Australia is trying to have a very good relationship with us. So there is something called as Australian Foreign Policy Blueprint, so which was released in 2017. So there you see India is ranked as one of the Australia's international partnership. They have clearly told in that blueprint, India is one of the highest ranked country where Australia wants to maintain international partnership. So this is told, and recently actually you should have visited India some 2-3 months back. You should have visited before this COVID happened, but due to the you know that there was a huge bushfire which happened in Australia, right, which destroyed a lot of acres of land and killed a lot of people and animal. So the Australian Prime Minister could not visit India at that point. But 4th of June, we had a virtual meeting with the Australian Prime Minister, and we know that traditionally welcomed with samosa and all those things. So that is the type of relationship what we are maintaining with Australia. So that maintaining a good relationship with Australia, because more than 1 lakh people, Indians, are studying in Australia. That's a very big numbers actually. And more than lakh people are studying in Australia, and equally lot of people are working in Australia. Indians are working in Australia. So this is very good for our repatriation of foreign currency into Indian economy. So at the same time, there are a lot of other things which I cannot discuss because we are already 12:14. I think I have surpassed my time limit what was allotted to me, and I think it's time for us to take some questions. So if you have framed some questions, I think I will be happy to take some questions. Hope I was able to make clear what is this global world order means for majority of us, where strategically how India is being placed in the coming years and what are the advantages which will be flowing in India. So only thing is whether we are ready to accept those challenges. That is the only thing what we need to look into. Thank you for giving me an opportunity. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to address the gathering. So any questions, please let me know.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. I don't think that we have completed 1 hour, but it was like very, very, very inspirational and valuable information you are sharing with us, sir, regarding that post-COVID environment, different economic and political conditions of different countries, what measures India must take to overcome this pandemic, and then Indian international strategic partners, global products prospects, diplomatic Gulf relationship with India, 3 potential powerful countries, India, USA, and China, and many more, sir. Many more. It was just fabulous and beautiful, sir. Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, I just wanted to move to the next session, that is the queries session. I request Ms. Shruti V. ma'am to raise queries which has been posted by different participants. Ms. Shruti ma'am.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, here is a question which has been asked by Jagdish Gowda.
Yeah.
Have we reached the expectations of Make in India or Made in India? Have we reached the expectations of Make in India or Made in India?
I got the question. See, expectation has not been set fully actually. See, Make in India and Made in India is a routine process which keeps on going. Okay, there is nothing called as targets which will be kept here. But at least sincere efforts have been made now in order to push the economy towards self-sufficiency. So in order to make India a self-sufficient country, it's very important that we give a lot of scope for our local products and we encourage our own technology. And that is one factor which India is not doing good, especially when it comes to the question of technology involvement in production, right? So most of our 60% of products what we manufacture is used for self-consumption. We don't brand it. We don't think in terms of export quality and all those things. So in that angle, I think Make in India and Made in India still needs some improvisation. And definitely now there is a very good opportunity which is flowing back because localization has taken a very good sign of revival now instead of globalization. All this time we used to go for import substitution only. We never thought of export. now right opportunities has come where we can focus more on export orientation. So if I want to make more export promotion as my objective, then localization, especially Make in India and Made in India, will be one of the most targeted thing which will be encouraged in the coming months. And this you can see already. Our MSMEs are already starting preparing masks, ventilators, all those things for global requirement and all those things. So I think there is a big push now which has happened. So you cannot measure it saying that this was a target and this is our achievement. All those things we cannot measure. It's a continuous process. It keeps on going.
Thank you, sir. So next question from same person.
Yeah.
What measures do we take to meet international skill standards?
Yeah, that is one of the biggest challenge actually, especially in terms of skill center. If you have read the day before yesterday's newspaper, there was an article in New Indian Express which talked about the performance of the skill metrics in India. So the Prime Minister Kaushal Vikas Yojana, which was launched in 2015, which has enrolled around and trained around 62 lakh people across India, only 15.5 lakh people have been given employment. That means hardly 23% of people have been employed. That means there is something shortage of our skill sets. So we have only 13,200 skill centers across India, but in China it is 8.5 lakh skill centers are there. That is the major thing which is happening here. And also one of the important thing what India should do is we need to link the skill center to universities. That is not happening now. Okay, we are not linking these skill centers to universities or institutions. So there is a recommendation now, especially in the new education policy which has been rolled out. They have tried to link between three things. One is industry, second one is institution, and third one is government. So these three bodies should integrate together: government, institution, and industry. Unless and until we integrate these things, skill will not be imparted in the level at which India is expecting it. So I think in the coming years, we can see some changes in the ministry's skill ministry also, the way of functioning and the way they will be implementing these things in our skill centers. So if you ask right now, I gave the statistics, only 23% of those persons who are formally getting skill sets have been getting employment. Rest 77%, whatever the skill sets we are giving, is not up to the mark, which is not up to the what economy is expecting. So I think a lot of things needs to be done in this skill related activities in India. So it's a responsibility of institution, that is colleges and universities, and at the same time it's the responsibility of the industry and also the government to take that skill centers to institutions.
Thank you, sir. Sir, here is the next question from Sujata Mohan.
Yeah.
What measures will be taken by the Indian government to compensate China products?
I didn't get the question. What compensate means in what way? Compensate means in what way?
Alternatives maybe, sir.
Alternative, I think we have the alternatives already. We have alternative for 3,000 products. 3,000 products, Chinese products, what we are importing, right? We already have alternatives for that. Only thing is now we need to go push for localization. We need to see that we need to go for Make in India first. I'll give you one small example of my daughter. So 15 days back, I took my daughter to one of the shop to get her, what do you call that? What is that? Medical, I don't get that. A medical kit or something. She was asking. She's still at 8-year-old. She wanted to have that toy thing, right? That medical kit. I took her to the nearby shop, and the shop owner showed me 5-6 varieties of that medical kits which are available for playing purpose. And my daughter selected the one which was made in India. I asked her, why you are not selecting the other one which has a very good competitive things with that? Why you are not selecting? The price is cheap. She told, no, I don't want made in China. I want made in India. See, this is the mindset what we need to develop. That's it. I didn't teach her. I didn't talk about. She is seeing the news, seeing all those TV, whatever, and she's seeing whatever the discussion is taking place at home, and that made her think that Chinese products should be not bought at any cost. So today, anything she will ask first, is it made in China? Even apps also she is not going. Earlier she used to play a lot of things, games on mobile, and now she sees whether she'll ask the first question whether it is a Chinese game or what. If I say Chinese game, she will not see. See, this is mindset. We need to change our mindset. And 3,000 products are there, which are equal products or equivalent products of Indian manufactured is available in India. Just we need to shift it to that culture. That's it. So government cannot do in all these things because we have a WTO agreement. Government cannot ban Chinese product. WTO agreements are there. Multi-station nation agreements are there. So according to that, we cannot go for banning of any products. Only thing is we need to we need to go for buying more Indian products. That's the only thing what we can do.
Thank you, sir. Here is the next question from Saqib Azam from UAE.
Yeah.
As a strategic partner, in what all industries we can dominate the exports, and how as a citizen I can contribute to it?
Okay. See, very good question. The main activities what India can contribute is in food processing industries. Food related and food processing industry is one industry where India can contribute. And of course, IT related, IT industries where India has its own charisma in the international markets. We can contribute even in IT related industries also. So food and IT are the two important sectors where India has a huge opportunity for us to go for export market. So as an individual, how can I contribute? Yes, sir, I think you are a professor, I think so. So you can educate your students in order to become entrepreneur. That is the only thing which you can do it in a large scale. So you can push your students in to become an entrepreneur, and whatever is required for them, whatever the skill sets are required for them to become entrepreneur, I think you can take that, take those things up, and you can train them up so that after completing their graduation, they become entrepreneurs. Because most of us have now realized, so entrepreneurship is one thing which can create huge opportunities for you, especially where you don't depend on only fixed monthly salary. There is no fixed monthly salary in entrepreneurship. So you work hard, you reap profits. So that is the mantra which is there in entrepreneurship. So I think that is the only thing what you can do, sir. You can help your students in becoming a good entrepreneur and do a startup industries and take up government assistance in various forms which have been given to them, and make them self-reliant, and also encourage them to give jobs to others. So creation of job is also there in entrepreneurship. So I think that is the only thing what you can push for, sir.
Thank you, sir. So here is the next question from Manjunath, sir.
Yeah.
What is the role of strategic partnership in present economic development and development solutions?
See, the role is very, there is nothing called as role which is be defined here. Okay, entire thing is how do you lead the entire country? That's very important. See, strategic partners are those people who take their decision on their own and lead the entire country. See, as of today, India was not considered as a strategic partner, but India still started reaching to other countries, having dialogue with other countries, trying to go and meet people, building relationship. See, this is what the role of a strategist is. So there is nothing called as scope which has been given under United Nations or some other international bodies. They don't give any roles and responsibility as such. So as a strategic partner, it becomes my responsibility to look into the various avenues and opportunities which will be available, and I need to take the lead. So how do I take the lead and how do I drive that is what the strength of a strategist is all about. So that is what they expect.
Thank you, sir. So next question from Bhagya ma'am. What will be the impact of repatriates on the Indian economy?
Very good question. Very good question, actually. See, there are both advantages and disadvantages of repatriation. Advantage is that we will be getting a very good skill set people in India, because these are the people who have come back to India serving in various countries in various capacities. So I think around 1.2 lakh people have already come to India from different countries. And there are still another 3.5 lakh people who are awaiting to come to India because of this COVID situation. So majority of these people are skilled employees, and they have been having very good skill in various areas. So most of the skills are in engineering skills, medical skills, and all those technological related skills. And definitely this will be challenging for those people who are still in universities, who are graduating from universities and coming out in search of job. That is one of the very dangerous situation what India will be moving into, because those people will be competing with those people who don't have skill sets in India. Because we have only formal education here, we complete our graduation and come out of colleges, but those people are there who have already sensed the entire globe. They know what are the skill sets which are there, and they have been equipped with those skill sets, and they come here. So that is one advantage, is that we get a lot of skill set people. I think most of them will be becoming entrepreneurs. Instead of going and searching job, I think they will be starting up their own entrepreneurship. So good skill sets and good ideas will come. That is one thing. Second thing is, Indian economy will have an hit, because repatriation money, every year they used to transfer that money to Indian family here. So those people who are working in foreign countries, right, every year they used to transfer around $63 billion. That is the estimate what was taken before this COVID started. $63 billion is what the money they used to transfer every year. That is various people who are working outside India who used to transfer money to India through various accounts. So to that extent, India will be losing some of the majority of the money, because these people have already come back. The repatriation money will not happen to India in future. So that will be also one of the foreign exchange loss which will be hitting the economy in a larger scale in the coming years. So two things. One is advantage is that we'll be getting back skilled people. Second is they will be competing with the local people. That is a disadvantage again. We cannot call it as disadvantage, but it will be a challenge for the local people. And the third disadvantage is that we'll be losing the money in the form of repatriation income, which used to come earlier. That will not come going forward. So this is the thing which will be happening in terms of repatriation people.
Thank you, sir. The next question asked by Padmavati. What measures taken by Indian government for controlling unemployment in the present situation?
See, unemployment, as I told you, unemployment is a situation which still persists in India. Okay, it keeps on going. Okay, you cannot make unemployment, you cannot find a solution for unemployment problem. Why? Because we did not take any serious measure of controlling the population from 1985 to 2000. The 15 years of our not making any single efforts to control the population, right, that has created in a lot of graduates and youths coming out in market searching for job today. So this is something which has happened in the past, and we cannot keep on blaming the past also. We cannot say like that. But only thing is, I think infrastructure development is one of the activity what India should take up, like upgradation of national highways, or linking of rivers. Okay, there are a lot of rivers which are there in India, which are flowing 365 days in a year, which doesn't depend on rain. So government can take up initiative of linking of rivers. So what is the advantage of linking of rivers? The linking of rivers will create lot of employment opportunities in all the states of India. So I think that is one of the area which we need to focus on, linking of rivers. The second one is about infrastructure. I told you, construction of ports, construction of highways, building rural roads, and construction of flyovers and dams, irrigation facilities, all these things. So India should push money for all these things now. Capex should go up in all these areas. This will create a lot of employment opportunities, because technology wise, if you are asking, technology will not create employment opportunity because of AI, artificial intelligence and all those things, robotics, artificial automation and all those things. You cannot think of creating employment. And the latest survey which was done with the 5 top IT companies in India, it shows clearly that most of the IT companies are going for either robotics or automation or AI technology, and they are depending less on human resource. So employment cannot be generated by IT companies now. Employment should be generated either by rural infrastructure or infrastructure projects. Second one by agriculture sector. That is one area where which can create huge opportunities for employment. So we need to focus more on those 2 areas.
Thank you, sir. So here is the next question from Bhagya ma'am.
Yeah.
What will be the winning industry in the days ahead, and what preparation is required by the sectors to face the challenges?
No, I didn't get you. What is that? What is the? Can you please repeat?
What will be the winning industry in
Winning
the days
industry.
ahead?
What is that? Winning industry. What is that? I didn't get you.
Winning.
Unique. You are talking about.
What will be the winning?
Winning. Okay. Sorry. Winning
Industry in the days ahead, and what preparation is required by the sectors to face the challenges?
So what are the winning industries you are talking about? Okay. See, when we are talking about Make in India, we are talking about MSME sectors. They are the winning industries. So all the MSME sectors which are strategically placed, which takes technology into consideration and start working for the global demand, right? Especially in terms of export-oriented products. They are all will be the winning industries in the coming years. So whenever I'm manufacturing any product or whenever I'm planning to give services, I need to make sure that the products and services, whatever I deliver, right, that product and services should be of a exportable quality in nature. We need to adhere to the export brand. We need to adhere to the quality standards, which are the global benchmarks. So those type of standards needs to be adopted. Only if I can incorporate those things in my products and services, what I provide and manufacture, right, then definitely that will be the winning industries in the coming years. So what is the second question, madam? Second part of the question you asked?
Thank you, sir.
No, second part of the question I didn't answer, I think. First question I answered, winning industry. What is the second? Something was there in that.
What preparation is required by the sectors to face the challenges?
Okay, the preparations are that you need to be aware of the global brands and all those things. So what is the thing which is lacking in your products or services which meets the international standard? That is something which you should be aware of. And the second thing is about intellectual properties are very important. So that is patents or any grade or geographical marks or all those things. Even that is also very important. You need to have all those things in mind before you need to, these are the preparedness. And also about IT, information technology related services. So how you can use the technology to the maximum extent in order to give better services to your customers. See, customers tomorrow will be coming from any part of the globe. So we cannot think that customers will be there only in the context of that particular village or particular city where you are operating from. I'll give you a small example. See, many of our industry doesn't have a valid email ID. Okay, when I'm doing a business, if I don't have a valid email ID, what it matters for me? Today, when we are talking about global integration, we are talking about competition from global angle. We are thinking of becoming an export hub. But if I don't have a valid email ID, and if I don't look into my mails, or if I don't pick my calls, then what will be the fate of my business tomorrow? See, this is small things, but this makes a major difference. So we need to be prepared with all these things. We need to be equipped with all the IT related skills. We should have all the competent knowledge, especially in terms of technology, patent related and all those things. So these are the preparedness, I think, what we need to have in order to face the global challenges.
Thank you, sir. Next question from Rupa M. in this COVID situation, is it possible to start skill centers in institutions because it requires some practical experience?
No, your voice is breaking, madam. Your voice is breaking. Can you repeat?
Sir, Professor Rupayam has asked one question.
Yeah, please.
In this COVID situation, is it possible to skill centers?
Yeah, skill
institutions. It is required some practical experience. That is what ma'am is posing a question.
Yeah. See, skill centers are just like running a regular business itself. Okay, so online skills and all you cannot train. Only skills what you can train online is about all your IT related skill. So any skills which requires application of mind, right? I think you can do it online itself. But there are physical skills also which is required, like apprenticeship training programs for ITI and diploma holders and all those things. See, this cannot be taught in online sessions and all. So in such cases, you need to be given training on a virtual, on a physical mode itself, where you need to be going and joining an industry and learn those things. But that's what I'm telling. We need to have an integration now with institution, government, and industry. All the three put together, we need to come out with a solution for seeing that our university students, when they come out of the colleges, they have employable skills. So today we are finding that they don't have that skill sets. So I think the institution needs to drive it from now onwards, irrespective of it being a COVID period also. So wherever there is a need for virtual training, right, that needs to be imparted now. And I think a lot of institutions have already started a lot of online programs, especially to upgrade the skill set, which are certificate driven courses, and which requires a lot of application of mind or agile technology thing related to numerical thinking or logical building skills and all those things, right? I think they can be taught on online itself. No need for them to come to colleges and learn. But only physical skills like apprenticeship training programs, all those things, definitely they require interactions with the people. They need to visit the place.
Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, ma'am. At the end of this session, it's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion on behalf of SDC group of institutions, management, principal, faculty members, and the entire team and volunteers of this international webinar, to extend a very, very hearty vote of thanks to the Honorable Guest Speaker, CMA N. Ravindranath Kaushik sir, who blessed us with their presence and took out valuable time of your busy schedule. Sir, definitely we are sitting very far, but our hearts are very connected. This is a very valuable time what we all have shared. And at the same time, I also wish to express my gratitude to our Chief Patron, Mrs. Usha Gangadhar ma'am, and Patron, Mrs. Pushpalata ma'am, for providing encouragement and support to all of us. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. And thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And also, I am very grateful to all the people who have participated in this webinar and hope this relationship will exist for a longer period. And at the last, but not the least, I congratulate all the organizers for the success of this first session of our international webinar. Tomorrow, we will meet at the same time. Thank you. Thank you once again, sir, for your valuable time sharing with us. It was very informative. It was very, very information and inspirational words from your side. And tomorrow we will meet at the same time, at the same place. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.